right, Love and Torah part 40. And the reason that we're still doing Love and Torah is because, quite frankly, I'm lazy and I didn't have time to do anything else. No, the reason we're doing Love and Torah is because normally I would do maybe something like we could read Psalm 119, which we just did for 22 days, or we could read the book of Ruth, which is another tradition for a Shavuot thing. But I really, because we did Psalm 119 as our challenge, the reason was I wanted you to kind of get a sense of the heart of David, okay? And I really feel like this Love and Torah teaching that we're doing, especially the section that we're into now where we're in Romans and then we'll be going from there, I think it really is all about getting that heart right in the context of love and Torah, and in the context of the two great commands, right? The command to love Yahweh your Elohim with everything, and to love each other with everything, essentially, okay? And I think that maybe sometimes we think we're struggling more with how we love Him, but I really think it's much harder, and we really struggle a lot more loving each other. And so that's what we've been trying to focus on now for the last, I don't know how many parts, but for a little while now. Okay, 10 or 12 parts worth probably. So let's continue in Romans chapter 12. And since I barely got started in it, we'll reset with verse 1 again, but we're going to get into some of the things that are happening starting in verse 3 and 4. Okay? So Romans chapter 12, I call upon you, therefore, brothers, through the compassion of Elohim, to present your bodies a living offering, set apart, well-pleasing to Elohim, your reasonable worship. And let's just remember that, just that verse alone, it's not just talking about physical things. Present your body. Without thought or emotion, the body's just a lump of flesh and chemicals, right? So presenting your body is not, the body has to have thought and emotion guiding it. So he's saying, present yourselves, all of you. This may be a more idiomatic phrase, saying, present all of you to Elohim, a living sacrifice. Okay? And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you prove what is that good and well-pleasing and perfect desire of Elohim. And we covered that, I think, pretty well last time. For I say, through the favor which has been given to me, to everyone who is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he should think, but to think soberly, as Elohim has given to each a measure of belief. All right. Let's just get into this verse just a little bit more than we did last time, which is this idea of thinking more highly of yourself than you ought to. You are not to think more highly than you should think. And by the way, the of himself is in italics, which means that it doesn't necessarily appear in the Greek transcripts. Let's just take those words out for a second. It says, look, you're being encouraged not to think more highly than you should think. And so what could that look like? What does that mean? Well, you may think more highly about yourself than you should, or it gets more specific than that. Because you can say more highly, meaning I think I'm great when I'm not great, or I think I'm something special when I'm not, or some other thing like that you may be thinking. But really, I think it has more to do with, because the rest of the verse says about giving a measure. In other words, each of us is given whatever we're given. And when you start to think more highly than you should, then you start to think about going into areas that you are not given. And that's when we get in really the big trouble. Look, I don't know how else to explain this, except that, again, with the body, we've been talking about this quite a bit. The body seems to have the challenge that in psychology they'll call overly connected, or having a problem with boundaries. All right? Now, I didn't do, when I did premarital, we didn't do the kind of same things I run you guys through, but the pastor that was doing my premarital counseling put my wife and I through a program that basically was going to come up with whether or not you're connected, disconnected, or overly connected. There were some other aspects to it too, but that was kind of like the main thing, because when you're properly connected and then there's a balance there, things go much better. If you're disconnected, then the other person might feel abandoned or ignored or less valued because there's less of a connection. And when you're overly connected, you tend to involve yourself in all kinds of things that you shouldn't because the boundaries disappear. Okay? So this was a really interesting test. I'm not going to tell you what my results and her results are because that's not the point. All right? The point is, though, as I now look at the body and I do all the counseling that I do and I interact with you guys, there seems to be a real problem with this. There are some of you that are very disconnected. There are some of you that are very disconnected, but not by choice. Then there are a lot of you, which seems to be a much bigger problem, and the reason I say bigger problem is because being disconnected is more of a problem just for you. Okay? Other people don't necessarily suffer from you disconnecting. Now, I'm not saying that if you're close to someone and then they disconnect, that doesn't feel painful. But if I've never known you before and you're someone who's fairly disconnected, I may not notice what I'm missing not having that relationship with you, although I am missing something not having it. So you guys who are disconnected are depriving other people of something because you bring something to the mix. Hopefully everybody received that, right? Those of you that are disconnected and very happily semi-isolated, you're stealing from us the blessing of whatever it is you were given to share. And I'm not talking about sharing a word or a message, your presence, maybe your compassion, maybe just that you listen, whatever it is that your gifts are, you're depriving us of when you're disconnected. Because some of you think like, well, I'm not sure I feel like going to services. Well, what about the person that needed you to show up? Were you thinking about them when you selfishly decided you didn't feel like going? Think about it that way. Because somebody may have needed something that you do naturally as part of your gifts. Even if it's something you think of as being small, but to them might be big, like the fact that you're a good listener, which I have to tell you is not a small thing. It's a huge thing. When a person needs someone to talk to and have someone just listen, I mean just listen, not fix it, counsel it, and everything else, but just someone who can sit there and listen and look at you and you know they're connecting with you and they're engaged and listening. And then you feel valued because someone is actually listening to you. But you didn't show up. If you didn't show up, that person didn't get to have that. And so this is something that we want to think about. So you can be disconnected. But then the bigger problem, because it actually actively causes problems for the people around you, because after all, like I said, if you were disconnected and I didn't know you, I wouldn't know I was missing something from you. The overly connected, though, are much more openly problematic because they tend to have boundary issues and they tend to act like everything that comes into their awareness, or most anything that comes into their awareness, somehow involves them. And that almost always goes badly. You know, Billy and I sometimes are talking, and don't get upset thinking we're talking about you, but we're talking, sometimes the only answer we have as to why somebody's doing something is because they're nosy. They're just busybodies and they're nosy. Because we'll say, well, why is so-and-so involved in that? Or why is so? They're nosy. And some of you are just don't know how to get your nose out of other people's stuff. Because in your mind, it's your stuff too, because you're aware of it. You don't have those boundaries. And that's where you start thinking more highly than you ought. Because that's when you involve yourself in some place you ought not be. And you start offering correction and counsel and inserting yourself. This happens especially a lot on social media, right? Somebody posts something, and I'm often just shocked of the names of people that pop in. I'm like, why are they in there? They're not related to the person who posted. They're not in the congregation with the person who posted. They're not. I mean, I have no idea why that person felt they had to jump in. And I laugh. I go, because this verse. That person thought more highly of themselves and they thought they needed to be involved. Because after all, you need me to come in and insert myself. Look, I gotta be careful with this. For the most part, for most of you, I am your rabbi. I wasn't just gonna say I am your rabbi and something like, not mine, fine. For most of the people here, and if you look on Facebook, you will almost never see me jump into the arguments, jump into the fray. And actually, I could, theoretically, if you're one of my congregants, jump in and say, hey guys, you need to calm down or knock it off or straighten it out. Oh, but yet, It's incredible how many of you guys just have to insert yourself in things just because you're aware of it. Like somehow it's now your business to do. It's not. Now you may see somebody else jump in, and then you think, I need to save them. I need to rescue them. I don't mean save them like in the religious way. I mean, I need to protect them and help them. They may not need that. And besides which, you may not realize that you're getting involved in either two people who are very close friends that really need to have their own thing out. Really should do it less publicly, by the way. They should do it privately. It could even be two family members you don't even know are related. That happens a lot too, because their last names are different, so you have no idea it's two family members. It could be a parent and a child, or it could be a sibling with a sibling. It could be two congregants that are very close and you don't even go here. You don't really know the backstory and the context. All you know is the little thing you see, which is why you should never do this in public. Because everybody's going to fill in those blanks any way they want and jump to all wrong conclusions about what's going on. And I have no idea why this generation now, and it covers a lot of age groups, but the people that are alive right now seem to be absolutely hell-bent on posting everything in their life, especially when they're upset. I'm going to break your phones and your computers or get you kicked off and banned. You never need to post anything. It may be nice to post something sometimes. There is never a need to post anything. I think some of you pull a muscle not posting. Others of you pull a muscle not commenting on somebody's post. And by the way, I'm going to address both sides of this. Some of you, for whatever reason, only will like certain people's posts. Of course, the other people that know you get offended. So that's one side of this. The other side of this is, why do you care if people like your posts? Why do you get offended? Well, I don't understand why so-and-so, I see that person, they like this person's post, but they never like my posts. So, who cares? Why do you care? Well, I thought they were my friend. Well, I don't know. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But you're not going to know that based on whether they liked your post. I only like one set of posts, and I rarely even remember to do that. And that's when my wife posts pictures and stuff, and she likes it when I go on and look at the pictures to show that I looked at them, and then I click the like. All right? But that's because it's my wife. But I'm not getting on there and clicking everybody else. I'm not even reading anybody else's stuff. So if anybody's knows that I'm aware of something, it's only because somebody else told me. Okay, I'm like 0 on Facebook. Do you understand that? Except to go to the M2I group page to answer questions that people posted that have been waiting for 6 months. I'm trying to be better with that. Because I don't have the emotional time to waste. Now, how are you going to love each other when you have all this emotional weakness, pettiness, insecurities, and needs emotionally that are never going to be met by everybody? You're going to always be disappointed. You're going to always be frustrated. You're always going to have your feelings hurt. I don't understand. Life was so much better when we had, when we're sitting around waiting for cable to finally come to our neighborhood. No cell phones, no internet. You literally had to go see people to talk to them. And you wouldn't, and somebody think, well, we had phones, yeah, but it was expensive. You paid for every call. So you thought a little bit about making phone calls, and you thought about how long you were on there, too. Nobody does that anymore. They just sit there forever on a phone call or texting or whatever they're doing. They don't care, or just watching something and they're scrolling through the screens. But it's the emotional place. We're not going to be able to love him or each other until we get that emotional space. And we have this problem with thinking highly, or I should say more highly than we should. And when we think more highly, we're talking about stepping into a place that is above our relation grade. If I'm counseling you and you have a husband, I can't overstep in giving you counsel where your husband should be. Now, I can go higher if he comes to me, because now I have a different role to him than I have to you. because you have him. Did everybody follow that? So yes, I can still be higher, but only if he comes to me. If you're the only one coming to me, I can't, because you already have a covering of a head. That doesn't mean you can't come to me, but understand that I have to treat it a little bit differently, okay? Now, the same thing you should understand with you. There's certain things that are appropriate with your best friend, with your close friend, than with your casual friend or your acquaintance, or with a family member, bloodline family member, and one that's not. One, if it's a child of yours versus if it's a parent that's your parent, whatever the relationship is, has built into it appropriate positioning, appropriate levels of involvement. Look, even when you might think that this is as simple as it gets, I'll give you an example that could maybe confuse some of you. I'm going to give it in two different ways. All right. Dad is disciplining the child. Dad said, I'll handle this, and is taking care of the child. Mom's watching, and mom decides she needs to add more to it. Don't do that. Dad's handling it. But I don't like the way he's handling it. Well, that's your problem. He's handling it. You can't usurp that. Now I'll go from the other side. Dad walks in, mom's handling something. Don't undermine mom either. If you don't like what she's doing, then you take mom off to the side, talk to her, and then either mom goes back and fixes it, or then you can go back and fix it the way you want it to, because you are the head. But since dad is the head, mom, you got to just let him do what he does. Now, if you don't like it, you can still talk to him off to the side, but it's his choice. But neither one should be embarrassing the other and confusing the child with how that goes. Because at that moment, the child needed to know to focus on one person. See, some of you have that problem with everything. In other words, you'll listen to me, then you go over the internet and find 15 other teachers teaching different things about the same subject I just taught, and now you're confused. Because you've now elevated people into places they need not be, which is what I want to be clear, which is why I've always told you there's nothing wrong with listening to teachings, but you need to have one teacher. Multiple teachers is only going to confuse you. This is not me telling everybody you shouldn't listen to anybody but me. You can listen to anybody you want. But when you hear something that could be confusing to you, or you're not sure what to do because there's not one voice saying the same thing by everybody, then you go to your teacher. And let the teacher set you on the path that that teacher, who's your teacher, needs you to be on. Remember, selecting that teacher is your choice. But I can tell right away when somebody's listening to more than one teacher, because they're confused. They're not on solid ground. And there's no doubt that that would happen, because there's very few teachers out there, when you listen to enough of them, that agree on everything. So something that they're saying is not going to agree at some point. Do not think more highly than you should. If you're going to, as a child, correct your parent, all of us would agree that is wrong. Okay, you see a child try to do that something, and the parent looks at the child like, excuse me? Anybody been there? You know what I'm talking about? Usually a hand movement is fast coming. But yet you do that in your vertical alignment. Because why would the child be in trouble? Because it's a vertical problem, isn't it? They are usurping, undermining, rebelling against, or what word you want to use, that authority that is yours. Okay, I understand you don't agree with me, but you do not get to talk to me that way, you may say to the child. Okay? I know you don't like what I just said, maybe this, that, or the decision I just made, but you do not get to talk to me that way. Do you understand that applies? Are you good ground? We talked about Shavuot. Are you ready to receive? Is the dirt tilled and ready to go? Because I'm going to mess with you right now. Do you know that applies in every vertical alignment? If you are in the lower position, the same thing that you would think to the child, from the upper position to the child, you are now in that position. You don't get to talk to the person in the next level up the way you might think you should be able to do. Just like the child shouldn't be doing it. There's an appropriate way to address those higher up the ladder. You need to know that. Because Abba needs you to know that. That's part of what he's trying to get you to understand. Because as you treat any authority, is how you will ultimately treat him. And that's why we start off with the fifth commandment about honoring or respecting mother and father. If you never learned that as a kid, you're struggling with it still. In every vertically aligned relationship. You didn't trust and honor them, then you're not going to respect and honor your parents, your teachers, your bosses, your co-workers that are maybe higher up in supervisory positions, ministry people, whatever it is, you have not learned to honor and respect the vertical structure. There are structures out there, the military being one of them, where it's painfully obvious. Okay, let's say you have a position. I don't know the right names of everything. Let's say you're a platoon leader. So that's a small group of people, relatively speaking. And you have authority over that small group of people. But you are under someone who's more of a company leader, or whatever the next bigger thing is. And so as you expect to be treated, you must also treat. Remember, we're all in the middle. There are those that we have responsibility for from an above position. And by the way, what is the position of above? It's bestowal. All those I'm above, I want to provide and give to something. I want to give them something that my role is to give. Okay? As a parent, my role to give is different than as a rabbi. Okay? Rabbi, I'm here to give you teaching, guidance, instruction, counsel. As a parent, I'm providing shelter, I'm providing instruction in righteousness, I'm providing how to live life. I mean, this is a parent's job, right? As a husband, I'm responsible for certain other things, but it's all about bestowing to my wife, to give, to provide. So don't ever think about when I talk about hierarchy, you guys get all hung up with being a boss and being in charge. It's not about that. It's about respecting the person whose responsibility is higher than yours in that particular area. But when we think more highly, we're elevating ourselves above. It's a usurping phrase. Don't think more highly than you should, because then you are usurping. You're overstepping. That's the phrase that we use often, right? Overstepping. Overstepping the scope of what you're supposed to be doing. And that's why it doesn't anger me. It doesn't offend me. I find it frustratingly humorous how many people want to correct me from not being above me in the vertical. If you're not in the vertical, you have no business trying to correct me. That doesn't mean you can't talk to me about something that you think might be wrong or this or that. That's not the same as correction. Correction is, you need to knock it off, you're wrong, you need to stop, you need to change, you need to do this differently. That's correction. Coming up and saying, Rabbi, you said something and I'm not sure I agree with it and I'm struggling this or that, whatever, and we can have a conversation. But when you come up and say, I'm wrong, and you're correcting me, that has to come from a right, appropriate alignment position. This is why you can't just discipline my child. You're not in his vertical. Do you understand? I'm in his vertical. My wife is in the vertical, my child. Look, I even had to tell that to those higher up the vertical. Don't overstep and come down. My parents have a different role. Grandparent is not parent. So when it comes to parenting, they're not actually in that vertical. They're related to my children. Unless I tell the children they're in the vertical, they need to listen to them. My good friend, we call him Uncle Bob, his children and my children have been told that if I am there and I see his children doing something, they are to listen to me like listening to him, and vice versa. That's an established now new vertical that the children recognize this person is now in my vertical. Is this making sense? Okay, now some of you think, why is he talking about all this? That's what the verse is trying to get you to understand. It says, look, I'm saying to you that you need to understand that everyone who's among you not to think more highly than he should think, but to think soberly. Soberly means to think rational, sound thoughts. Not emotionally driven. That's where you overdo and you overstep and you usurp. It's because you get angry, upset, defensive. You get righteous indignation or whatever you want to call it. No. Be quiet. Allow that vertical. I mean, I've told the story how, I was a place where a young lady was up on a stage and her bra straps are showing and her dress was whatever it was, and somebody's looking like, can you believe? And I said, you know what? Where we are right now, she's married, her husband's here. As I also know for a fact her father's here, and her pastor's here. That's enough vertical alignment, people, that can say something if it's necessary. I don't need to say anything, neither do you. Do you understand what I'm saying now? Okay? Yeah, clap for that. All right? So some of you think about person in my position. Do you think in your arrogance and pride, I want you to know that's what it is, that Yeshua and the Father who I'm under, more directly because of my position, not more directly in all aspects of life, but in this position, are not capable of correcting me and setting me straight and getting my attention? They need you to do it? That's pretty arrogant, if you ask me, okay? Now, you may not like that, but I can promise you they don't care that you don't like that, okay? Nowhere in this book did they ask your opinion on what they were doing. Zero. Not one verse where there's any mention of the above asking the below its opinion before doing whatever it was going to do. Now you might say, well, Yahweh did talk to Abraham before he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. That was a test of Abraham. That had nothing to do with the decision Yahweh was going to make. Because when Abraham got down to Yahweh's number, the conversation ended. Yahweh already knew what he was going to do. Don't tell me about them conversations with Moshe. Oh no, Moshe changed his mind. Nonsense. That was a test of Moshe. To see if Moshe was humble enough in the face of the rebellious people, and he passed the test until he struck the rock when he shouldn't have. Okay? But I want us to understand this verse because this is really where we get into all kinds of trouble. We overstep, and come on, let's be honest. Does it ever really go well? Seriously. When you overstep, does the other person go, oh, thank you so much for jumping in where you didn't belong? Does that ever happen? If your nose would get bloodied, you keep your nose out of the other people's business more. But you know what happens? They go to bloody your nose, now you're mad at them. Mad at them, you're the one who stuck your nose where it didn't belong. And we wonder how we're going to love each other. How are you going to love each other when we can't understand boundaries? And we can't understand the vertical structure appropriately. We think more highly of ourselves. And again, this more highly is not like I'm full of myself, meaning I think I'm so great and look at me and no, it's overstepping more highly than where I belong in the vertical, in that relationship, in that situation. Let's say you're my doctor. When I'm in your office, if you're my doctor, I'm going to do what you say. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to ask questions when I don't agree, whatever. I'm going to respect that position medically. I'm just using an example, right? I know that a lot of people have a problem with, let's assume it's a good doctor that you picked because you like their approach. But I'm going to respect, when it comes to diagnosis and other things, that this is the person that has more anointing and more skills and more training than I do. Now, let's say that same doctor is sitting in here having some sort of problem that is in my area of expertise. Now the vertical switches. And he now needs to show me the same respect I showed him in his area. Does that make any sense? Are we getting that? Okay? So it's not just you're above everybody or anybody or wherever you are in that vertical all the time, 24/7. It's roles that we play. And in those roles, we have to recognize where we are in that thing that we're in. Whether it's a congregation, a job, a family, a marriage, whatever we're in, what is your role? And more importantly, what's the limit to that role? What is the limited scope of that role? This we struggle. We struggle mightily. And I want us to really hear that, okay? Now, because he's saying, look, instead of thinking this way, thinking more highly than you should, but we should think soberly as Elohim has given to each a measure of the gifts, of belief, of understanding, whatever it is. People have a measure. That's where they are. Now, we could also take this into the belief part where you say, okay, I've been doing this longer. I've got more understanding and emunah and belief because of my experiences. You're brand new. You're a little bit, shaky and jittery as a new person might be, but I shouldn't look at that as being, well, look at me. So we could take it that way as well. But when it talks about giving a measure, we're taking that into everything. He's given all of us a measure of things. He's given more to some and less to others in different areas. There's lots of areas I have less and you have more. And there's some areas, one area maybe specifically, in terms of counseling and teaching Torah, I may have more and you have less. You understand what I'm saying? But just because I have more in one area doesn't mean I have more in all areas. And so we have to understand that. It's very, very important, all right? Because he's trying to help us understand the context of chapter 12 now. He's saying, look, you need to offer yourself as an offering. In other words, stop being about me, give, receive. No, I'm going to give of myself. I'm going to make myself a sacrifice, which means I'm going to esteem others above myself. I'm not going to think so highly of myself. I'm going to do my role. The higher up my role is, the more sacrifice needs to be there, the more giving, okay? Billy will come to me on a regular basis and ask, are you going to do counseling? And I always look at him like, of course I'm going to do counseling. I mean, even though I don't need to, I could just, like for example, like last night after, not last night, yesterday at the picnic, I could have just enjoyed the picnic. But I said, sure, I'm here, and my whole life in this role is a sacrifice. So as long as I'm here, I will help, I will do, all right? And I appreciate the applause, but I don't deserve any. That's the job. See, you would applaud because somebody was doing something impressive. It's not impressive. It's just simply, you do what you're supposed to, servant, you're a useless servant. You're just doing what you're supposed to do. To be real useful, you have to go above and beyond. And so maybe for that I get a little applause because I go above and beyond. But I still don't think it's above and beyond. Like then we have dinner like we will tonight, and guess what he's going to ask me after dinner? Are you going to take counsels? And I'm probably going to say, sure. And I'll stay until they're done. And Billy will stay too, because he's trying to learn how to do what I do. And I don't want applause for that. That's the job. That's the calling. It's just like when you stay up and do the things you do once you have a child, to take care of that child, to stay up with that child, and nurture that child when they're sick and whatever else is going on. You lose a lot of sleep, you're a parent. You lose a lot of sleep, you're in ministry. But you don't care because you understand that's your job. Now, some people get real frustrated because they don't understand that's their job. I got a lot of absentee parents, their children running all over the place, and they don't even know where their children are because you don't understand your job. You must know where your children are. Especially when, let's face it, you know if your child is the child that sits quietly and does nothing, or your child is the one that's likely standing on top of furniture, upside down, knocking things on the floor. And then you don't act really surprised when I say, by the way, your child just flipped over 6 chairs and is walking on the furniture, okay? But you should have been the one finding out if your child is doing what you know they're likely to do. I was one, I had one. You know what that's all about, but you have to own that they are your responsibility, not mine. Not the shamashim that go around helping to keep things going on. We had a problem earlier during services where a bunch of the children were running around, flipping on the tables, walking on the tables, whatever, right in the middle of services, and not a single parent of them had any idea or could care. I don't know who they were. I didn't see what kids they were, so don't look at me like I don't know who was out there. I know they were out there, though. You own your role Oh, no, you'll be much quicker, though, to get involved in like a Facebook post between two other people that has nothing to do with you. Instead of parenting your children. That is dumb, okay? That's just foolish. You brought these children in the world. They're yours. Pay attention to them, okay? Know where they are. I got an app on my phone now. I know where they go. It follows their phone. I know where they are. When they go to work, I know when they leave work. I know that when they should be home. I know if they're actually where they're supposed to be. And I'm not spying on them. They voluntarily put that on their phones. I know to help keep them safe. They know I'm not a nosy body. I just want them to be safe. Now, you got to also remember, I've already told you, my children have a different relationship with me than maybe yours do with you. My children don't lie to me and hide things from me, like at least as much as they might with you, because they're not afraid to tell me things. Okay? I've already built that. So they come to me often, and they'll let me know what's happening. They'll come and apologize for things that they didn't tell me, because even if it was not a big deal, just because they realized they should have told me. And even though I never found out anyway, because they just want to maintain that relationship. They know that they're safest when we have that right relationship. Think of that, what I just said. You are safest when you have your right relationship. Husband and wife, parent and child, ministry and you and the Creator. You are safest when you have the right relationship. Amen? And I've worked that with my children, so my children know that. Now, they don't always like everything I decide. They don't agree with that. It's not like I don't want you to think we have this ridiculous, like, unicorn relationship that doesn't exist. Okay, we don't. But we've built in a relationship that's mutual trust, respect, and love, right? That love. They know that I love them. Which is why some of you may be surprised when you see my son or my daughter on a regular basis. Wherever they are, if they walk by me, they want to stop and give me a hug. Okay? And I want them to also. But it's not obligation. It's because we have developed that relationship. And let me tell you, it took effort. There was prices to be paid on all sides to build that level. But the same thing then works with a husband and a wife. Prices to be paid to build that level. Same thing works with you guys and me. There's effort that has to be made. And you guys are funny, though, because what you'll do is you'll try to go around, and then you'll start going as a default to Billy, or you'll go to Rabbi Tom, or you'll go to Gary or one of the other shamishes, because you don't want to come to me. They're just going to push you in my direction anyway. Because they know otherwise they will be usurping and overstepping. There are things that are appropriate for them to do, other things not. But you are still afraid of the relationship. And you're not afraid of ones that you usurp and you jump into, well, you should be afraid. Everything is upside down and inside out. Can we understand that you came from a world and live in a world that everything is inside out and upside down? Amen? And that includes everything about how you see things, how you respond to things, how you picture things, how you interact with people. All of this stuff tends to be done backwards, inside out, and upside down. You're afraid of the people you shouldn't be. You're not afraid of the ones you should be. And by afraid, I mean awe, reverence, respect, etc. You set boundaries where they shouldn't be. You don't see any boundaries where there should be. Everything is messed up. We need a full reset. But only you can choose to reset. And you have to make those choices. We're not going to love each other the right way without doing these things. We're not going to love him the right way without doing these things. You already had a way. If you're more than a teenager, like if you were, an adult when he called you into this, you already had a way of interacting with him or the way you saw him. Let's start off with the Creator. You already had some sort of level of, through your way you're culturally, your family, your parents, the particular denomination you grew up in, whatever it was, you had a belief about him. And you had a way of what you thought was appropriate in interacting with him. Or maybe you didn't even think about him at all. And now you're having to reset all that. It gets tough. And it's going to take work. It's going to take a lot of work. And you guys can do it. You need to do it. All right? Because listen, he says, look, for as we have many members, and you're all like, oh, wow, we went back to the Bible. Okay. So, verse 4, it's right here, I didn't forget. I want to get 75 parts out of this, so I'm slowing it down. No, I'm kidding. For as we have many members in one body, but all members do not have the same function, so we, the many, are one body in Messiah, and members each one of one another. Okay, so see, this is going exactly in the context that I gave you for the other verse. You have to be careful when you read Scripture that you don't arbitrarily decide that a thought has ended and a new thought has started. Okay? This is why everybody gets screwed up with the whole Matthew 23 and the rabbi thing. Because there's a thought, then okay, we stop that thought, do this, and then we go back to a thought. It doesn't work that way. So here's the context. We were talking about esteeming those above ourselves or thinking more highly of ourselves. And then he talks, as Elohim has given each a measure of belief. But then we're now talking about those things being about functions. And then we're talking about in verse 6 now having different gifts. And so it's clear that this isn't just about level of belief. How you understand and trust or don't trust the Creator. The context is the belief in the context of these things, function and gifts. For as we have many members in one body, but all members do not have the same function. Did you receive that? Very simple. All members, we believe we're all part of the body. Yes or no? Yes? All right. You don't all have the same function. So stop acting like you have the same function. You don't, just because you're a member of the body, have my function. I don't have yours. But when you start doing my stuff that's not your stuff to do, now you're going back to verse 3 when you're thinking too highly of yourself. Because it has to do with overstepping function. And that's why if you end up becoming a shamash, you have to understand you're not an elder. If you're an elder, you're not a rabbi. If you're a rabbi, you know, what are you? And you, the body, need to know that too. Stop going to those that are not qualified or their function is not that. In other words, you'll go to the shamashes for counsel. You'll go to staff members for counsel. Why would you go to staff member for counsel? Staff member, unless you're asking about their function. Right? I have somebody who functions administratively, somebody who functions in terms of bookkeeping and records, somebody who functions in different, then you go to them for that function. Someone whose function is the grounds and the building and making sure everything works. If you go to them about one of those things, it's the right thing to do. But if you want marriage counseling or talking about some other thing, why are you talking to these people? And you do, by the way, all the time. Or you'll go to one of the shamashes. The only counseling that should be going on here are Rabbi Tom, myself, and in a limited capacity, Billy. And the reason that Billy gets to have it, he's thinking, but Billy doesn't have a title. No, but he's training with me. He sits in most of my counseling sessions. He has watched what I do, and he's been a pastor before. So he already has anointing and appointing and training there. And I'm observing it to see the level of it, okay? And he knows what not to try to counsel. Because I trust watching him that he knows the boundaries of the limited scope of what he is qualified, as far as I'm concerned. Now, he may feel he's qualified to do a lot more, but he knows what I know he's qualified to do is limited. Okay? And he respects that vertical structure. But you guys still aren't understanding that it's not just about you doing appropriately, but you should go to the appropriate person. If you're going to some of you got all kinds of wrong answers since you've been in this congregation because you got them from the wrong people. I'm not kidding with that. The mess that we've been cleaning up for the last 4 months is incredible because it always goes back to, well, who told you that? Oh, so-and-so. Well, they didn't have the authority to tell you that. 2 people made a mistake there. You shouldn't have asked them and they shouldn't have told you. Because that was outside of their function. And yet, that's why we're going to, at some point, be handing out an actual little handout for the congregation members that tells you, these are all the people on the staff and the leadership. Leadership and staff are not necessarily the same thing, okay? And although everybody in the leadership is on staff at the moment, but they're different, okay? Leadership, primarily at this point, is simply myself and Rabbi Tom and our wives, okay? That's your leadership. A lot of other people are on staff, though, and they have authority in their functions. And you're going to get a handout that's going to tell you, when you have this issue, this is who you go to. These are the people, so it'll tell you what George does and what Mercy does and what Billy does and what Rabbi Tom does and everybody on the staff, what Richard Yetter does. So you know that's what you have an issue with, that's who you go to. So you are recognizing the function within the body, okay? Because we seem to get very confused. And I think it's confused on purpose, because we go to who we want to go to, whether it's the right person or not. Occasionally, it's just because you thought it was the right person, and I get that. That happens sometimes. Because sometimes a person holds them out as leadership when they're not at leadership, but they think they are, and so they hold themselves out that way. I've seen that happen over my 20-plus years, and that happens. Billy's seen it wherever he's been, okay? So what we have to understand is that, look, there are lots of us in the body, and we all have different roles to play. And it's amazing how reluctant you are to play any role, which is why we have to constantly beg for people to volunteer to do anything. We've got 170 to 200 people physically in this building, and I have a hard time filling 12 slots with volunteers. That's ridiculous. Yet, some of you are thinking, oh, but then I'll miss something. Listen, I don't ever get the feast you get. I work the whole time, and when you're not here, and before you get here, and everything. And I have no problem with that, so I'm not trying to get empathy or sympathy. But those who serve, especially the leaders of the different serving areas, they have to go back and watch all of this later, because they're going to miss most of it because they're serving. And they don't have a problem with that, because that's a blessing to do the function that they have talents in. And you can help in that. But yet, yesterday was one of those, not yesterday, Saturday was one of those, Billy was asking for somebody to do something, and he finally had to walk around and almost start grabbing people because nobody stepped up. And this happens all the time, and I don't get it. And you guys will come here, and always the first thing you guys say when you move here, and we got a lot of people here, oh, I want to help. And then I never see you. Billy, true or no? Okay, he said yes. Because they want us to know they want to help, because that scores all points in their mind. I've impressed the ministry. I'm here to help. But then you disappear forever. A few of you, when you show up, you just show up and sit around until somebody gives you something to do, because you're going to be here. Rocky does that. Okay? When he's here for a couple of days. He'll show up every day. I'm here. What can I do? Give me something to do. Now, some of you don't have that kind of availability, because when he comes, he has nothing else to do while he's here. He wants to help. And then he goes home to do whatever else he does with life, right? But some of you are like, well, I don't have that kind of time. But how about whatever time you have, saying, look, I've got this time slot. What can I do? Oh, does that make any sense? I've allocated this hour, 2 or 3, or whatever it is, in a week, on this date, I'm available, and then you go to Billy and you say, because he's sort of the assistant, his title, so everybody can understand, is the assistant executive director. I'm the executive director. So he generally is the place that channels through everything. So either it comes from me and goes to him, or he now has connection to all the other departments, and he has an awareness of what's going on. If you want to help, don't come to me, go to him. I'm just going to send you to him anyway. Because I oversee everything, and I don't need help. Because if I want something done, I give it to a department head to do, and then they get the help they need. And I don't need help with what I do, I just do my stuff. Okay? And so I would send you there. But do you understand? It says we are all members, but we don't have the same function, but we as the many are of one body in Messiah, and members each one of another. Now, having different gifts according to the favor which was given to us, let us use them accordingly. Now, bear in mind, this is not necessarily just talking about all the spiritual stuff, although he's going to list some of them here. He says, if prophecy, according to the proportion of belief, if serving, in the serving, or he who is teaching in the teaching, or he who encourages in the encouragement, or he who is sharing in sincerity, who is leading in diligence, he who shows compassion joyously. Wow, that covered a lot of things that weren't necessarily like being in charge of anything. Matter of fact, almost none of it had any authority. The person prophesying is teaching the word of Yahweh with authority. It could be anybody up here with his speaking out of the microphone with the word of authority, and that doesn't mean he has any then authority. He could just be the person speaking. I happen to have multiple roles, right? I'm the executive director, and I'm also teaching, right? Or prophesying more often than teaching, because I'm speaking with authority as opposed to giving you instruction on how to, Teachers are how, when, why, what, how do you do this? When do you do it? Where do you do it? Right? That's teaching. What are the feasts? Okay, there are 5 of them, and there are 7 holy days. And so you explain, right, the annual Sabbath. That's teaching. I'm the one trying to get you to take action. That's prophesying. Because I would expect that you already understand the material, but you're not doing it, is what the problem is. So I'm trying to light a fire. But look what it says here. The very second one was serving. If serving, in the serving. Do it according to the gift given you. He says, in encouraging, in the way you give encouragement. Wow, encouragement's a gift. Being an encourager. In sharing, do so in sincerity. Then there's one, it says leading, do it with diligence. So there's one authority place right there. In compassion, do it joyfully. Wow. There's other places where it talks about gifts of administration. Because a lot of people want to talk about, well, do you guys operate in the spiritual gifts? It depends on what you mean by that. All gifts come from above. The above is spirit. So yes, we operate in them. Are we speaking in tongues? No. Are we all prophesying? Only those who are gifted and supposed to be doing it. Are we all teaching? No, only those who are gifted and supposed to be doing it. But we do operate in these things. Do we understand what I'm talking about? Okay, amen? Because this is really, really important that we get it. Now look, this all now ties back to this whole love and Torah thing, because what does it say next? Let love be without hypocrisy. Because all of this is an expression of love. How we interact with each other should be done in the context of love. All the instructions that I showed you from Scripture for loving Elohim was showing you how the interactive behaviors express love. Being here on Shavuot is an expression of love towards Elohim. When you keep Shabbat 2 days ago, expression of love. When you chose to eat appropriately and not eat unclean things, that's an expression of love. So what he's saying here is, look, let love be without hypocrisy. The things that we do to express love to each other, don't do it with hypocrisy. Shrink from what is wicked, cling to what is good. When we see wicked and good, what 2 things are we really talking about? Shrink from that which is not the way Yahweh designed it to be. He says, instead, I want to make sure that you're focusing on and embracing and clinging to that which is good, which is what Yahweh intended it to be. Now, he intended the vertical structure to be a certain way. He intended the way you would treat someone below your in the structure and someone above a certain way. Guess what? When you don't, it's wicked. It is wicked when a child treats a parent the wrong way. It is wicked when a parent treats a child the wrong way. It is good when a child acts appropriately to a parent, when a parent acts appropriately to a child, because Yahweh tells us what that looks like. When it's functioning as intended, it's good. When it's being used inappropriately and not functioning as intended, it is wicked, evil. Are you understanding this? This is important. Because some of you really don't understand why your marriages are all messed up, because you're not functioning as intended. One or both of you is not functioning as intended. More likely both. Maybe one more than the other, but usually it's both. And when a marriage is going well, it's because you're acting and functioning as intended. Maybe that's only for a brief window and then it goes sideways because then you start acting again as you shouldn't. And now you're in wickedness. It's hard to receive, I guess. Listen, I'm a husband. I don't find it necessarily simple to do. I don't think anybody really does. You'd think it should be. And you can't blame your spouse while you struggle to do your part. Well, if she would only, or if he would only, I'd do my job, be so simple. Maybe. I've never seen that happen, but okay. When both of you are doing your jobs, you're at peace and you're functioning fine and you're getting along. Which is why you say, I don't understand, we were doing so great then. Woo! Well, because for that little window of time, you were functioning as you were supposed to. Because you're capable of it. Shockingly, for some of you. But you're capable of it, and it can be done. But we have to understand, look, we have to be without hypocrisy. So what's hypocrisy? Okay? So you all know the whole point, what being a hypocrite is. You understand hypocrisy. You know how wonderful it feels when you find yourself being a hypocrite. And you know, you don't like it. You feel guilty, you feel awful, you feel ashamed when you realize you're being a hypocrite. Although the problem is we're so good at pointing out the other person's hypocrisy and seeing how they're being a hypocrite. We have to be able to look in that mirror and see clearly, not darkly through that mirror, and not walk away forgetting what we saw. And part of the way you get the mirror is you come to the leadership and get counsel, where I can hopefully have an opportunity to tell you, this part you were doing right, this other part you really need to work on. And then talk to the other spouse and say, this part you were probably okay with, but this other part you need to work on. And then things will work much more smoothly. Well, the only reason I act like that is because, and then you start finger pointing, always finger pointing. Don't do that. Do your part the best you can, and if the other person is not getting any better, then you need to come and see me. Now, for all you single people, all you need to do is, I wish I could just line you up with I don't want to embarrass anybody, but I would line you up with the couples that struggle, which is basically everybody. And I'd stop picking on the couples. All couples struggle. But I'd want you to find out, listening, the ones who they counsel and their spouse doesn't, and see how hard that is. Because they cannot actually get anywhere. And they're frustrated. I'm not going to ask them to raise hands. I know a few of you because I counsel you. So I'm not going to ask you to raise hands. But the one counsels, whether it's the husband or the wife, sadly, it's almost always the wife, and the men just won't do it. And so, men, if your marriage is not going the way it needs to be, and you're not talking to me, I don't understand why you're doing that. Why would you not get the help? Because you don't want anybody to tell you you're wrong. I mean, let's just be honest. You don't want anybody to say, well, you're right here and right here, because I will agree probably with something, but I'm going to tell you where you're wrong, where you need to change and where you need to fix things. I'm not going to take your wife's side. Trust me, when they come to me, the wives, I give them plenty of grief. Ladies will tell you that. But I'm not usurping you husbands and your wives come to me. I say to them, look, there's only what you can do what you're supposed to do, become a best wife you can be, and that's all I can tell them. I never say anything about the husband from the point of view of, well, make him do this or make him do that, but they want to know what I can do. I say, I can't do anything unless they come and see me. They've got to come. But to do so, you have to be willing, like Deuteronomy 17 says, to hear whatever's going to come out of that. Most of you don't want to do that. Most of you do not want to do that. You know what? I wish I could convey, and this might be hard for some of you men because some of you are terrible when you're sick. okay? Men can be the biggest pain in the you-know-whats when they're sick. I'm very docile when I'm sick. I'm very compliant. And so when I get sick, and I remember I had the terrible pneumonia and I was very sick, I told the nurse practitioner, I told the people, Uncle Bob, all the people working with me, just tell me what to do. I'm not going to argue. I'll do whatever you say. Because I recognized I was sick. Can you get counsel that way? Yeah, you can clap for that. Yeshua says, I eat with these people because the sick are the ones that need the physician. When they picked on him for sitting with the publicans, he said, the well don't need a doctor. You need to come and say, Rabbi, I'm sick. In other words, there's a malady, there's a virus, there's something going wrong in my marriage. And you need to sit there like I did and say, and I will do whatever you say. I trust you. You're the expert. Okay? But it took me, I'm not saying I wouldn't have been more compliant at a lesser sick, but remember, I was at a point where I couldn't get up out of a chair without help. Literally, I had to be lifted out of a chair, and I was on oxygen 24/7, and I had a fever of 102 for 10 days. My oxygen level was down to like 71, 72 at one point. I was in terrible shape. But you shouldn't have to be in that kind of, some of your marriages are that bad. And you're not ready to go to someone and say, I will do whatever you say. I've reached that bottom, what else can I do? I can't even get up out of a chair. Whatever you say, I'm going to do. And I didn't just say that randomly to anybody. I said it to a person that I knew had the right approach, the right heart, and was because other people had used that same person, and other people were getting good results. So same thing that you do when you vet out ministry, right? I knew people that went to this person. I knew people that had results from this person. I knew people that had an ongoing relationship with this person. And that's why I said, whatever you say, that, I'll get the medications, I'll get the supplements, I'll do the routines, I'll do the regimen you want me on with the nebulizer, whatever you want me to do, I'm going to do it. Why? Because in this case, I have no authority and no expertise. You're the authority. I'm going to sit here and be submissive. So, but why would it only be that you do that if you do that when you're physically sick? Aren't you physically sick and tired of fighting with your spouse all the time? And being frustrated all the time? And being miserable in your marriage all the time? And wondering, that horrible place of like, I hate this, but I don't really want to get a divorce. But I hate this, but I don't want to get a... That's who you guys are. What a miserable place to be. You don't want to be in the marriage, but you don't want to get a divorce. So you're in hell. But you're not in hell because of your spouse. You're in hell because both of you are not doing the things that need to happen. And if both of you would come and be submissive and compliant and recognize that you're both the reason why you're all messed up, then maybe something could actually fix. Because there isn't a marriage out there that can't fix if both want to. There isn't. I don't care what it is. If both really want to change, and it may mean big change, if they really want it and they're going to put the effort in, any marriage can be saved. Problem is that you can't fix it all yourself. It takes two. And so you can't. And at some point, these will end up in divorce because you can't do it yourself. The other person doesn't want to cooperate. This is why, again, back to the singles, as we're going to wrap this up, because now it's almost 10 after 1 here. An hour and 10 minutes here. So singles, I told you, if you're listening, if you're really listening to everything I just talked about, relationally, everything else, you should know that there would be nothing more foolish than to marry somebody that A, is not in the same belief system you are, and B, is not submitted under the same leader as you are. Because you need to know that when things go sideways, and they will, I'm not trying to wreck you with all your wide-eyed hope. Those of you that have never been married. If you've been married before, you already know. But if you've never been married before, you need to know it is not going to be nothing but, smooth sailing and all that stuff. There's going to be lots of bumps and rough waters and everything else. There is absolutely going to be. Two human beings adjusting to each other is rough at times. But if you are under and you come and get counseling on a regular basis together, especially at the beginning before you develop all those bad triggers, it can work a whole lot more smoothly. So do not go out there and marry somebody that you're both not under the same covering. I did a wedding not too long ago. The young lady was under my covering. The young man I didn't know at all. And I told them, you either have to go under his covering where he goes, or you both have to come here. I'm not going to be involved in it other ways. Because you can't do well without that. You can't. Every one of you who's married knows what I'm saying is the truth. You need someone to be able to look both of you in the eye, or whichever one needs it that week, and say, you need to knock it off. All right? And there's no other way around that. But, very few of you do this. Very few. A lot of individuals do, but not with the spouse. And the spouse will be like, I'm not going to go. Well, listen, then you're going to stay miserable. The ones who do, by the way, it works, okay? Can we get some applause for that? The ones who do, it works. Okay? Especially the couples that I counsel them before they get married and continue to counsel them regularly after they get married, the new ones. It works if you do it, but you need to do it. Because you need to know that you both have someone that you're willing to submit to. Because, see, you don't want to submit to each other when you're fighting. You're not listening to each other. You're not receiving from each other. So my job then becomes to get you to hear the other person. See, that's part of this whole love thing. You need somebody with authority to get you to actually see what you're doing, hear and receive what the other person's saying so that you can make necessary adjustments. You can't own it if you can't receive it. And when you're angry with each other, you can't receive anything. So you need someone else to say, okay, stop. Did you hear what that one just said? Let's say I'm talking to the wife. Did you hear what he just said? Then let's say I'm talking to the husband. Did you hear what she said? Do you understand? Oh, but I don't care if it's right or wrong. Did you hear what they said? Now, do you understand that to them, that's their reality, whether it's right or wrong? And we're going to validate that that is how they feel, and that is their perception. And then we're going to do the same thing with the other person. In case you're wondering what I do in these counsel sessions. We're going to do a lot of validating. Validating doesn't mean that you're right to be upset. Validating is that we're going to have the other person understand that this is what that based on what you felt happened, this is why you feel the way you feel, and that they have to understand that to you, that's real. Now, even though the other person's thinking, that's ridiculous, they shouldn't be upset about that. But they are. And you need to validate that you know that you are recognizing that person is upset about what happened, and this is what they feel is what's going on. Now, if you want to now address why that wasn't your intent and that's not, then I have to make them now hear your side and receive that you didn't mean to cause that and didn't mean to hurt them in that way, if that's the case. You understand what I'm saying? But they're not going to receive that from you until you first recognize that they really were upset by something you thought they shouldn't. But this all goes back to love. Love is a relationship that involves more than one person and adjusting to each other and needing some sort of a guide to get you there. Does that make sense now? Are we starting to get this? Hopefully we are. Let's go before the Father. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. Father, we come before you. And Father, we appreciate so much that you put us in the situations, in the relationships where we can truly learn love. Love through every challenge, love through every difficulty, love through all of our emotional and psychological mess. Loving people that are hard to love. Appreciating that people love us because we're hard to love. I always appreciate when somebody's announcing their anniversary and they're saying, have empathy on my spouse because they put up with me for 20 years, 19 years, 30 years, doesn't matter, whatever it is. Because at some point you're recognizing, which is healthy, and Father, we need to recognize that we're hard to love. we make it hard. Not that we're hard to love by default. We make it challenging for someone to love us. And really the reason it's challenging is because we create such difficult hoops to jump through to express love. We make it hard when love can be so simple. And it can be felt through simple things. Father, soften our hearts. Help us to own what we need to own. Reject what is wicked. In other words, reject what is not the way you intended it to be. And embrace what is good when it comes to love and relationships, which is the way things are the way you meant them to be. And give us the patience, the mercy, the compassion to be able to go through those challenges to come out on the other side in a wonderful, loving relationship. Almost nobody here has ever had one. We've all had maybe one for short periods of time, but we've really not had long-term loving relationships because there's still too much of each one of us in those relationships that needs to be worked on, fixed, and adjusted. And help us to be willing to come before you through your anointed appointeds to get those adjustments done, to receive the adjustments. So, Father, we want to thank you, we want to praise you, and truly we want to love you and love each other as you would want us to do that, as Yeshua loved us. So, Father, we do want to come to you now, again, thanking you and praising you and giving you all glory and honor as we come to you in the name above all names, Yeshua our Messiah. Amen. Amen.